Welcome back to The Vote Matters. I'm your host, Tia Sneam, and here at TVM we discuss political topics through a nonpartisan and entertaining manner to empower you, the voter. Today, sitting alongside me is the producer, and we'll be discussing the differences between the RNC and the DNC and the commonalities between the two as well, since that was, a very big topic this summer.
Yeah, actually it was very big this summer. Both conventions recently just occurred, so we got to understand sort of the platforms for both parties. And just sort of the presentation of both of the conference or conventions was actually quite interesting, right? I thought the RNC, the way they sort of had it it was really cubicle in nature with a nice platform, and then they had the rock bands and then the people funneling down towards the stage. I thought that was a good presentation. And, the Democratic convention was more traditional, right? Sort of also funneling down, but sort of that big backdrop, the candidates coming out there. And I liked in the Democratic convention, everybody had their sticks identifying the different states, and they had their, both had their pluses and minuses. I found both of them actually were really good. I thought they basically energized the people that were there. And overall, I gave them both sort of high marks for their presentation.
I think the one thing that I enjoyed a lot was this is probably the first time in maybe 8 years or so that I witnessed the DNC and the RNC standing for a similar cause, which is to reunify this divisive environment in which we're living in currently, right? Like, for the last, 12 years or so, I think there's been so much drama, and there's been a lot of people that haven't been able to look eye to eye with one another, right? Or speak about certain topics without getting emotional. So it was nice to see there's an actual message of trying to unite this nation once again.
Yeah, I thought the theme were similar, absolutely. And they should be. They should be very pro-America and pro for the United States and the citizenry. But, I think where the rubber hits the road, like the differences, right, are in the various topics that they spoke about. And I think you identified, the topics themselves. What were they again?
Yeah, no, there were a few, let's see, at least 8 from the top of my, from my memory. But there was the economy, you had the border, abortion, climate change, police, taxation, government overreach, and then the Second Amendment, right?
Yeah.
So these were the main focal points that were definitely spoken about the most at the conventions.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I saw specifically more so on the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, than I saw on the Republican National Convention was the demonization of the candidate itself. Right. I don't know how many times they mentioned, the Trump, but it was a lot. It was a lot. And I get it. He's a very polarizing character. He basically, in and of himself, sort of creates a division in the United States. So I could see how that they wanted to use it, but it just felt a little over the top sometimes, that it came up way too much by everybody. When it came to the Democratic National Convention, where I thought they could have put a little bit more substance behind some of those things that are part of their platform, like you were talking about, the economy or the border or the police, how they're going to manage taxes.
So I would agree. Yeah, definitely the first day of the DNC was a rough watch, right? The first day you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out what are these policies that they're trying to push, right? Or what's the narrative that they're trying to push? And I think from what I believe happened is they realized, oh my goodness, that first day, Trump was the main dialogue, right?
Yeah, too much.
And I think after that is when you started to kind of see a little bit of a different shift in their approach with the DNC, right? Trump was brought up quite a lot, but there were also other times when, there were a few speeches where his name was never spoken about. And those are the speeches where I sat there, I'm like, there we go. That's something I could get behind, or that's something that I have no problem listening to. But true, to your point, the bashing is not necessarily the solution. It never has been, never will be. But, that's why I think it was so important for me to figure out what these 8 topics were, right? Like the economy is definitely the main focal point of both the RNC and the DNC. How, you have so many people that are of my age group that have an inability to be independent, and then, your age group is still trying to provide, for their families, and there's too much government interference to where you can't live in a like, how would you put that, into your own words, right?
Well, yeah. So when you look at sort of when you're young and you get old, right? So for the young people, they're trying to say, how can I start my life? How can I live that American dream? How can I basically get a good job? How am I able to get married, have children, buy a house, and sort of have that life, right? And that seems to be a bit of a distance for a lot of the youngsters right now. It seems to be out of reach. So definitely from their perspective, the economy is one really important note to say, how can I have the opportunity of the American dream that I saw my father or my grandfather have? For older people, it's sort of the other side of the coin is like, hey, we're getting into that age of where I want to retire. I want to have a life where I can travel, where I can spend money on family, and I can basically be sort of a pillar in order to keep everything working right and going forward, right? And both sides of that have a lot of worry, especially when you're talking about inflation, well, especially when you're talking about the changes that are going on in the economy. When you start seeing just where are the jobs? What kind of jobs are out there? What are we educating people for? What do we, all those kinds of things come into play. So the economy definitely is a topic that has a lot of concerns around the young. What does my future look like? And for the old, it's right. How do I basically make sure that I'm not going to be, running out of money, or I'm going to be out of my house, that I can basically have
the
a
rest
life.
Of your life in peace and quiet type of thing.
With dignity, right? It's just with dignity.
And I guess what were some of the differences and commonalities that you saw between the RNC and the DNC based around the economy, right? What did the RNC stand for, and then what did the DNC stand for?
Well, I think one of the things that was really interesting was when you look at the Republican National Platform when it comes to the economy, they definitely want to say less regulation. They want to basically let private enterprise, small businesses, basically take on a lot of the building the jobs, making sure that we have opportunity of growth for young people, entrepreneurs, so that we can basically let capital flow into the economy and be used in a way that's more productive. What I saw from the Democratic convention, they were a little bit more around sort of like programs, right? And whenever I hear government programs, it's government trying to pick winners and losers. And I've never thought the government was good about picking anything when it comes to winners and losers. There is a role for government, don't get me wrong. You wouldn't have certain industries without subsidies from the government. They just wouldn't exist. So there is a role for government, but there needs to be some constraint there. And you can't just have the Wild West either on the other side of the coin. So there has to be some compromise in there, for sure. It's just right now, I'm not feeling enough compromise between the two parties when it comes to the economy. Yeah. Not at this stage.
And then, we were talking a little bit about the kinds of jobs, right? Different types of jobs that are now trying to be created, or people are okay, I want to get a job, but there aren't too many jobs out there that would allow me to be independent or to not have to worry about these financial burdens, right? I guess that's my question is, when you say that we need more certain, specific kinds of jobs, what kind of jobs are those, So,
when you look at the economy and you start saying, where are the jobs going to come from? We're no longer like a manufacturing-based economy. Those days are sort of limited. We can bring some of the manufacturing back, but what we do bring back is not going to be as labor-intensive as before. There's definitely going to be a lot more automation and those kinds of things. There's definitely going to be ways that they're going to try and do these more efficiently. The kind of jobs that I do see is in the service sectors. And I do see where there's a lot of opportunity in like healthcare. You know, right now we have a very aging population across the United States, Canada, and Mexico too. Mexico's, demographics are showing that they're getting to that stage. So there's a lot of healthcare opportunities out there. Travel industry, entertainment industry. These are things that I think are going to be huge. I think people want to be more self-sufficient, so they're going to have that autonomous type of things that are going on. How do I get myself to have an autonomous car? Or how do I have things that are more autonomous with regard to washing the dishes or basically...
Oh, you're talking like an artificial intelligence type of...
Somewhat like that. It's just building a little bit more smart systems in there, but you're going to need people who be able to support and maintain those kinds of things. And that's going to create a lot of jobs. It's the same thing that you're going to see in a lot of any other service industry. They're just going to be looking for more clever ways of doing things. But does it keep shrinking jobs? At the beginning, some of this does shrink jobs, but in other times, it also starts to create a lot more jobs and opportunities.
Well, it seems like the biggest dilemma that we have right now is that, there could be more jobs here present in the States, but most of the jobs do get outsourced to other areas for, lower cost, right? Like we were talking about like automation or like the manufacturing side of the industry. It doesn't seem like manufacturing is that big here, but then you look at like China's economy, and China's economy is solely based around like manufacturing, or like, there's other places maybe in the Middle East or something like that, right? Like a lot of them are based around the manufacturing industry, and that's where the trade kind of comes through, right?
To some degree. There are things where, you got to look at like, when you look at the United States and you look at the world, right? We are the largest consumer of goods in the world. So for other nations to survive, they have to be manufacturers of something. And we have to consume it because we're a consumer-based economy. Does it mean we should be running heavy debts and things like that in our economy? That's a big question mark about what is that going to do to the consumption? What is that going to do to the manufacturing base? So these are a lot of big questions that need to be answered. And how the future looks for some of these things, it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But clearly, you have to create jobs. Great example of like industries that are just popping up are YouTube stations. Hello. This is actually employing quite a few people, whereas before you would only have Hollywood and you might have very small segments. But now with the growth of YouTube or other platforms out there, Truth Social and other ones, right? You see this industry is starting to grow significantly and it's employing quite a bit of people.
It's shifting a lot though. I would say it's definitely transformed the content, like content will never be the same as it was prior. I mean, it's very different than it is, or very different now. But to your point, I mean, it does benefit a lot of us creatives. Like us creatives will constantly be in some shape and way, like in a working place or in a working manner, whether it's script writing, editing, lighting, sound, like these are key elements that I feel like are constantly going to be around. Like everyone's like, oh, editing and screenwriting are going to go away because of AI. But to be honest, like you need the human touch. I've used a lot of AI products and humans still, in my opinion, trump AI when it comes to these softwares or writing, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, AI is... Let's talk about that really quickly, just because a lot of people have like a lot of concerns about, oh, the future is going to be completely AI and there's not going to... That's not what the intent of AI is, right? AI is only as good as the inputs, the requests of the information that you're asking for it to come out. So when you think about AI is really intended to be a collaborative tool. So if you have one person do AI, it's only going to give back whatever that one person has input. But if you, let's say you have a team of people working and they're coming up with thoughts and ideas, and then they take that and input it into AI, it'll just enrich what they already have and build further on, right? It's not a tool to do things for you. It is to be part of the collaborative space in which you create things. Absolutely. There is no like AI does it all and people are out of the way. It's part of a collaboration. Can it be a one-on-one, you and AI? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I find that is not the most productive way and the most efficient way to use AI. It really should be of a collaborative nature.
Exactly. And also the other part about AI is you do have to narrow down on your specifics, right? Like if you put in just a broad question or a broad thing, AI is just going to pop out 1,000 options for you, or it's not going to give you that concise answer that you're looking for. But the more and more that you utilize yourself with your AI figure or the collaboration of what you're talking about, the more specific and narrow, your solution will be. And that's kind of what AI helps you with, is it's more of like the guide towards where you want to go, but you still have to do the legwork to get to where you want to go, you know?
I do see the economy going more in that direction. So I think it's about training people to be more in a collaborative space where AI is going to be an additional tool in that whole conversation. Absolutely. So I do think this is an area of growth.
Yeah.
I think that you will see this in the entertainment industry for sure. Absolutely. It's going to be a massive benefit to a lot of people when it comes to that. I do think you'll see it in the healthcare industry significantly improve a lot of things there.
Yeah.
And I see it in other ways, right? So it's definitely going to be out there, but it's going to require teams to deploy these things, to support these things. It's not just AI on itself. These are requiring collaborative team efforts in order to make these things work the best way that they should work, to scale them, to make them flexible, things of that nature.
And they're always going to be adapting as well. That's the other thing a lot of people need to recognize is AI will constantly adapt, but it's not meant to like fully push you out of the picture. It's meant to just be that guide, is what we've been talking about, And I mean, I guess that's where my other point is too, is like, now that you're seeing the shifts within the workplace and like AI is being introduced into the workplace and just technology in itself is advancing, the education system seems to be shifting into that range as well. Like, prior to 2012, kids were still being taught how to write cursive or, to handwrite letters and whatnot. Now it's shifting more so to the technical aspects, right? Like, you need to understand the different softwares on your computer, Word doc, stuff of that nature.
Yeah, so as technology evolves, right, there are different levels of growth. So you have what you call like level 1s, level 2s, level 3s, level 4s. We're sort of level 4 moving to level 5 when it comes to sort of, do we need developers like we used to have, people that need to know programming language in order for me to create some kind of content using AI. That's one of the purposes, is to try and give you more empowerment and not have to depend upon a developer for certain things, right? So it tried to minimize the whole coding, aspect of any kind of programming that you need, that it takes that on for you. So you do have minimal skill sets to do certain things. So that just means the end user is going to be more empowered, and that means more of your creativity can come out. When it comes to education, and this I do think is an issue in the educational system, is the educational system, especially at the higher levels, is not training people to work in a collaborative manner with the coming technology. When you go into industries, you definitely have teams, and your teams work in a collaborative way with AI, at least in the companies that are doing very well. But companies that don't do that, don't get you sort of trained to be collaborative with AI, you're going to struggle a little bit more than other companies, because they're going to have that advantage as they basically generate things. So I think the educational system needs to incorporate that sense of collaboration in a lot of the aspects of disciplines through engineering, disciplines in the sciences, disciplines in the arts as well. You're going to get a lot more using AI. More, it'll still require the human aspect. It's going to be a team member of that whole thing. So that's where I find in the educational system that's the shift that needs to sort of start happening.
And also, just to clarify for everybody, I know it seems like we're not, honing in on the RNC and DNC, but this is also like with the introduction of AI, it's very important for you to understand kind of what AI is and how it's going to be operating in the future, because it does play a huge role in our economy, right? Our economy is going to shift more towards that technical aspect rather than it being, right, the manufacturing, the hard skills based. That's still going to be very important, but AI is going to play a huge role going forward. So that's kind of why we're talking a little bit, about it. But yeah, I mean, like the economy is constantly shifting. I mean, we're seeing housing costs kind of go up very high. We're also seeing education costs still going through the roof. And I guess, coming back to the RNC and DNC, right? Like, what are some things that you saw in which that they would most likely help with these dilemmas, right? The lowering of housing costs, or the lowering of groceries, or the lowering of education. Like, what are some things that stood out to you where it's like, okay, they're here to try and help the common citizen?
Yeah, I think often we think about it from a cost perspective. Oh, it's expensive, right? That's just a barrier, like a constraint on which we think about things. What we need to think about is how do we improve our earning capacities? How do we improve our purchasing power versus how do we sort of avoid costs? Costs are just part of the world. That's just how things operate. So it's like, what are the ways that they're going to improve that purchasing power? What are ways that they're going to basically give you a better yield on your education? And those are things that are important. So when I looked at, let's say, housing, right? What is one of the most recent things that I saw out there was Elon Musk has started a company that's called Box. And these are box houses. And literally they're like houses that can be moved on a trailer. They come in like a package and then they be unfolded, and you can basically use different units they're like modular, and you can build a house on it. And you can put it, and each of the boxes supposedly is anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. And it's like each box is like a studio, but you can make it a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, and upstairs. So you can take all these things and sort of package it together the way you want, just like a module, right? So this is some of that creativity that is coming out to solve some of the pain points that we have out here when it comes to sort of how can we make things give us better purchasing power for what we're purchasing, right? I don't want to just buy the standard house. I want to buy one of these new, put it anywhere I want, sort of an unfold. It's already eco-friendly. It's got everything necessary for it to be sustainable and quick to move in type of things, right? This gives me a better yield for my effort and my time and my money. So
it's not necessarily, it's all about the buying power then, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, so do I need to buy $1 million mansion, or can I basically buy a couple of these modules and get a piece of land that's really nice and then put these on there and have a great life too? It's like, how do I want to spend my money? How do I want to do it in a very efficient and productive way, right? I find cost is a driver of innovation. Like, things become prohibitive, somebody's going to figure out to make it so that people can make it less prohibitive from a cost perspective, but see more of the benefit from a spending perspective, right? That's where I want to spend my money, because that makes more sense.
No, that's true. I mean, that's also the mindset of an entrepreneur, right? Like, they see opportunity where something that's going to benefit just a common person or a common citizen, right? Like, it's all right. That's something that we can work on. That's going to offer them the ability to save more money and save more time, right? Because those are probably the two most valuable currencies known to man. During this short break, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And make sure to leave a comment on your thoughts about the RNC and DNC. As always, the vote matters. Stay tuned for more upcoming content. So, what could you see within the RNC and the DNC? How is the economy being discussed from both of these sides?
Well, it's when you look at it from the DNC perspective, right? They have a constituency of unions. And so they have the teachers union, they have the auto workers union, healthcare unions. They have all these unions, right? And so for them, one of the things is as this new innovations come into the marketplace, they want to make sure that these unions are not going to be sort of disrupted. or displaced, right? So their focus is on trying to make sure those things are sort of protected, because that's sort of a core constituency for the DNC. So they're all about job growth, but they want to make sure that it is a way that it benefits the unions that support the DNC. The opposite is sort of the RNC. The RNC, when you look at the Republicans, they want to basically say, let's give entrepreneurs more opportunity. Let's basically bring in innovation and allow it to be, you know, really fully utilized in a way that is creative and generates new jobs, new opportunities. And they're not as concerned about the overall impact for the short term on workers and things like that, right? They're not as, let's say, cautious. So what I find it's very funny, it almost puts them at two different opposite of what they normally are. Like, normally the conservatives are more conservative about something and the Democrats are more liberal about something. But when it comes to this new technology, it's quite the opposite. Mm-hmm. So what you find is that the Democrats are actually far more conservative around how they want that new technology coming into the economy versus how you see sort of the Republicans. They're a little bit more liberal about it. You know, so definitely with the new technology coming in, this new digital era, this digital age that we're in, I find that definitely the Democrats will definitely be more conservative about it. Mm-hmm. Because they just want to protect a lot of the union jobs or the blue collar worker jobs as much as possible, because that is their core constituency. Is it, you know, and the Republicans, it's not to say that they want to see people displaced or anything, but they're a little bit about, hey, let's get this technology out there. Let's give entrepreneurs an opportunity. This is where opportunity exists for us to really grow the economy really fast, really big, and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely different.
Yeah, I mean, but to your point, so you see technology now being a main focal point of discussion when it comes to our economy. Now, I think we talked about it a little bit in the past, just you and I, like, on the side, but you know, this isn't the first time where the economy is shifting. Like, you know, with technology being so prevalent in today's environment, it's still a naive product, right? But, you know, we look at like American history, like in the past, you know, you went through the agrarian age or the Gilded Age when, you know, the Gilded Age started to create this manufacturing opportunity for that of the agrarians, right? So like farming shifted and like the manufacturing aspect shifted. And then that was a whole new form of technology. Then, yeah, you go to a little bit more of like the 1950s where it's same thing, right? Manufacturing. Then it goes into the consumering and then the service industry, which is from the 1960s to the early 2000s. And to now the digital age. But through all those shifts, right, there were a lot of division, but there came a lot of great opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about it from a political perspective, right, each one of those eras, when we talk about going into the Gilded Era, it took Congress quite a while to catch up to all the changes that were happening with the manufacturing of steel, the electric industry, basically the whole coal and oil industry and the transportation industry, right? And sort of these giants of industry, when you talk about like Carnegie or J.D. Rockefeller, or if you're looking at J.P. Morgan, they really sort of were in new territory that the laws hadn't caught up with, right? But eventually the laws started catching up. And so they started to form things that were more, I would think, helping build out that middle class. And that's when you start seeing sort of that manufacturing space, that consumer space, where the blue-collar worker started to build that middle class in the United States from sort of that, I'd say 1940s all the way up until you have, I'd say, the 1990s and stuff. So now we're confronted with the digital age, right? And we're seeing it as a very disruptive force. And it's a sort of a little bit of a hit to that middle class right now. And again, we're waiting for the laws to catch up, to start putting in place to where people can be sort of knowing where they stand when it comes to this new technology and how to benefit their livelihoods from the technology, right? Right now, it's a bit uncertain. And I think that's what people are waiting for with regard to this election, probably even the next election, is they will establish sort of the rules and guidelines that will guide us through this new digital age for the next 20, 30 years, right?
So you'd say it takes another 4 to 8 years for that shift to fully be like...
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, this is such, it's nothing new. Like I said, this has happened in the past when we went to the Gilded Age or the manufacturing, consumer, or service. Now we're in the digital age. So it always takes time for politics to catch up. And that means the laws and the statutes that are going to basically help us understand what is permitted and not permitted. Like one of the biggest things out there right now is all around privacy, right? We want to make sure that our privacy is not abused when it comes to people taking information from Amazon or on Facebook or on these other platforms that we use for social media or purchasing things, right? Do they take our identity in and sell it for... So we're like, no, we want this protected. So laws are now coming into place to start saying what is permitted and not permitted when it comes to that kind of information, right? So it just takes time to catch up, but that's just an example of one of the things that's being tackled. There's other things that will be tackled, like what does this mean to our services overseas or our partnerships with other countries? It's going to take at least 2 more administrations for this to get all figured out.
Yeah, no, makes sense. But then, like, I'm curious, like, you know, we're talking about the grand scheme of things and, like, the big aspect. How about, like, from a local standpoint, you know? Like, the local levels when it comes to the digital age, right? Like, how can you see it kind of benefiting maybe, or also, like, you know, with this shift occurring, how can it help out with the local level? Well,
when you think about the local level, there's a lot of services people need. Like healthcare is going to be a lot of times at the local level. That's where people live. They are going to look for, a lot of times, instead of packing them into hospitals, try to move a lot of that healthcare into their homes. That means technology will start to be cheaper and more affordable to monitor, track, and sort of give them that independence of having a gracious way of ending their lives by taking that to the home. I think the same thing is also going to be very interesting to see what the impact is to the local educational level. Like what happens into schools that are for elementary, middle school, and high schools. How is this going to be adopted to help them understand how should I interact when it comes to this new digital age, right? It should be of a more collaborative nature, I would think. So it'll be really interesting there. You could see it also with things related to police force, right? So they're going to have ways for using this to help. I think it's not to overstep their boundary, hopefully. I think this is the whole pain point where people were like, we don't, defunding the police was feeling like there were certain segments of people that were not benefiting and actually were being punished by the law and how it was being enforced or chose to be enforced by the police, right? So I think in the digital age, there's a way that's going to have to happen where it's going to be done in a way that is not looking like it's discriminatory or abusing a certain segment of society, but at the same time, society is feeling secure and feeling like they're not basically, things are running rampant out there, right? So it'll be very interesting to see how that gets applied at the local level as well. So there's a lot of things I think will happen at the local level when it comes to this technology. I think healthcare is going to be a very big impact. I think security is going to be an impact. And we just talked about housing, affordable housing. We talked about education. What about other kind of services? I think people will be able to do a lot of things from home. So now there will be, you don't have to go to a building to basically have a job. You can do things from home, right? So there will be a lot more work from home type of opportunities going forward as well. So I think that's a nice sort of benefit as we move into this digital age, that you don't have to drive somewhere to do your work. You can actually do it from home. I still think there are places that people need to go and collaborate.
Well, like school, you know.
Yeah, school, but even for jobs, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see how this will all manifest into these collaborative environments. I know that they're going to have like Zoom as an opportunity, but I do think you need that physical come together opportunities as well.
Well, I guess that's what I was trying to, or my next question too, is now that with technology advancing to that level where you don't need to go into like the workplace, how are people going to still like feel a part of a community, right? Like how can they still be, like have that interpersonal connection with those that maybe they only see on a computer screen? Or, you know, are they going to put a little bit more effort and energy into getting people to be more physically active and to get them outside and to do things that will allow them to be around other individuals rather than just looking at a computer screen?
Well, when you think about things like, for example, healthcare, I can't see healthcare being done from a computer screen. I think people need contact, people need physical presence and things like that. So I do see that as where people are going to still have to go to somebody's home to help them, but it'll be local. I'm not going to have to drive to a hospital. I'm not going to have to drive. I could basically work at certain homes in a local area and really meet the families and meet the people I'm taking care of, right? So I think there's that. I think when it comes to schooling and stuff, I think sports are going to be really important because sports to me help you understand the whole value of collaboration, right? Working as a team, working for an end goal, you know? And that I think is an important piece of like making sure sports, so having these same sports where families get together for baseball games or families go and do soccer together or families do other kinds of sports. I think those are still important and those are really community-oriented things. I still think church is a very important component to things as well because in churches you'll see, it'll be very interesting, like you can get so much stuff today and you can really have these really interesting conversations, theological ones or basic ones on just spirituality that I think in the past you couldn't, and now you could do it in a more collaborative way, and you could bring these into the community as well. So it's not a challenge to your spirituality, it's a growth opportunity, I think, to how you believe and feel towards your path of faith and religion. So I think those are going to be really interesting as well. I don't see these as disruptive forces. Again, I see AI as a way to bring people more together in a way that is community and collaborative. Because I just don't see AI as a standalone doing things for us. It is a collaborative technology. So the digital age is moving us to be more collaborative.
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, I guess that brings me to, you know, the last closing line or, you know, question. With so much uncertainty out there in this world and with the new rise of the digital age, which is not just going to impact America, but the world as a whole, are you optimistic going forward into the near future? Is there optimism to be felt, right? Especially during these moments of uncertainty? So when we talk about moving into digital era, right? And we say, do we trust that the RNC, the Republicans are going to handle that best, or do we trust that the Democrats are going to handle that best? I personally think I'm more of a libertarian, the less government. People will handle it the best.
People will handle it the best. I do see a need for regulations and guidelines and things like that, for sure. And I do think there needs to be a way for things to allow good maturity so that it's not a fully disruptive force in our community. But it will be disruptive a little bit. But in the end, I think at the other side of all of this is a lot of community, a lot of collaboration, and a way that we as a community will never interact like we've never going to, how am I going to say this? We're going to interact like we've never interacted before because that's what AI requires of us in order to fully get the value from it. I think this is, like, I think the whole DEI thing, I get the intent. I just think the execution was not very good. But I do think it's, with AI, you're going to need to bridge these communities and bring different people together that they've never been brought together like before, right?
Or they just haven't felt like they've been.
Exactly. People that feel like outsiders will now be part of these communities. You need them because they bring diversity. They bring that different way of thinking in order to sort of fully get what you need to get out of these collaborative environments.
Well, that's the American experiment in a nutshell, right? Like, I
Pretty
mean, you
much.
look at our past as well. We're all from an ancestry that left their home to come and create their new home, right? And I mean, I guess that's the best way that we can describe everything that's going on right now. This is just a prime example of what the American experiment stands for.
Yeah. So, like I say, I don't, if you take and look at AI as a disruptive force that's going to displace me, then I can see why somebody would be fearful and untrustworthy about how this is going to get deployed, and it manifests in who I'm going to elect, right? And honestly, if you look at it from a collaborative perspective, I think it's going to drive how politics is going to be. I don't think politics is going to drive it. It's going to drive politics. It's a force of nature. It's going to drive faster than politics can move. And so just like the Gilded Age, it'll move fast and politics will catch up to it. I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. I do still think you have to be very aware of what policies people are promoting. And really look for what would be in the best interest of you, your community, and so forth. So vote smart.
Yes.
Vote what's going to make your house better. Vote what you think is going to make your community better. Don't vote party. Vote smart.
Hear that? Don't vote party. There is no party in democracy.
And I think what you'll find is if we go down that path, we'll all end up in a much better place.
Yes, I fully agree with that as well. And to our viewers back home, hopefully this was an insightful discussion. Hopefully you got some key points from what we were talking about, and hopefully you start feeling a little bit more optimistic about, the upcoming election in November. So be sure to stay tuned for more upcoming content, catch up with everything that'll be going on from our channel, and we'll be sure to keep on talking a little bit more about the RNC and DNC so that you are prepared and ready for November 5th. Thank you for watching.